Great, recording now. All right, so good afternoon, I guess at this point, everyone. Today I'm here with Joe Beam. Joe is a percussionist, or I guess mostly a drummer around the Houston area, but I sort of know him as a percussionist. Um, my first encounter with Joe was, I believe, actually at Sam Houston State. We played Spring Awakening together, I think.
Yes,
Um, yeah, and you did your master's degree there, correct?
I did undergrad and master's. Yeah,
Okay,
uh,
yeah.
Green, and I guess that would have been during the master's time, or
I think it was a little bit after. I think you had,
right after. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, yeah. You studied with John Lane, correct?
I did.
Very cool. Um, yeah, actually, Joe Beam is probably the only reason that I even got into the musical scene in Houston because we did that show together at Sam Houston, and then I think you gave my number to Jack Beadle, I think,
Yep.
and he called me for a thing at the stages, the Panto, and I don't know. I fell in love with kind of playing that style after that. Like I had done it a little bit, and it just kind of grew on me, and I really like it now, actually. So yeah, Joe, thanks.
You're welcome.
Cool. So today, I really just want to sit and kind of talk about your experiences as a drummer and percussionist, and kind of what the differences between those two things are, and what sort of what it sort of takes to you know be a percussionist, I guess. So first off, I this era of music that my class is currently talking about, right? This is the romantic era of music. So percussion, as far as I know, is kind of becoming a part of the orchestra. One of I think the examples that I sent to you was Symphony Fantastique by Berlioz, and that is like, as far as I know, one of the first sort of percussion battery things that kind of appears, in this orchestral style. Um, so what is your experience with this kind of music, this sort of symphonic style of music?
Yeah. So yeah, percussion as it started out in the in orchestral music, it was timpani. That was it. You're playing two notes. As it grew and adding cymbals and snare drum and these mallet instruments. By the time in this period, I mean, the Symphony Fantastique, there's a moment where there's I think three timpanists, and it's just a new age for this instrument, the, it's continued to evolve and grow, um, and and around this time is it definitely it was taking off.
Yeah. Um, so I know that most of your experience now. Oh, sorry, my dog just walked by. I know that most of your experience now is with drum set, and I imagine that that's probably more of what you wanted to do, like because that's what you do now. But being in school, like you're basically forced to play all of this rep. So when you were studying this stuff, what did you have like did you cater more towards like pitched percussion, like mallets, or were you more into like the non-pitched kind of rhythmic side of things?
So my evolution is kind of funny because I went to college thinking I was going to be high school percussion director. Like that's why I went to school was to teach
Yeah,
and to do drumline and all those things. I had a fantastic um, high school education and in the classical world. I didn't play drum set till I got to college.
yeah,
And so my whole background is actually classical, and the drum set evolved out of that. So I went to Sam initially to study percussion and to study with Chris Devaney, who is the principal percussionist at Philadelphia. He was in the Houston Symphony at the time, and very orchestral um, uh, studying there, and not the drum set. So it's kind of it was my goal and like to just be a percussionist, and the drum sets come after it from experiences I had at school, and something that I love, and yeah, I can't imagine not doing that now. Um, but as a percussionist, you know, I didn't particularly lean mallet or snare drum or drum line. I liked it all, and I still like it all, and it's made me a better musician and better drummer these days, having that background in this orchestral world. Um, the theater work that I do, I wouldn't be able to do half of it if I didn't play these orchestral instruments. So it's very closely knit and tied. There are a lot of great drummers and a lot of great percussionists, and not a whole lot that do both all the time. And
Right.
so um, so the you know back to where you're at, the whole orchestral scene is and those instruments, um, it's all near and dear to my heart. From and everything that we have to do as a percussionist, from playing timpani, from playing all the mallet instruments, marimba, bells, vibes, xylo. They all have different bars. They have different widths. They have different implements that we hit, from snare drum, tambourine, triangle, congas. The list is endless. From as a percussionist, what we have to do and how these instruments have you know in, grown in the orchestra setting. It's a worldwide instrument. From Latin America to Africa to Asia, all of these places have drums in their history, and in their in their culture, and
Mm-hmm.
Indian rhythms, tabla, all of it, and it's nice to have it all tied together and be able to incorporate this stuff.
Right, right. No, that's really cool. So one thing that you said is that you don't think that you would have been able to, I guess, get as kind of as far into the musical theater world as you have if it wasn't for some of these like, this classical training, I guess, for lack of a better term. Um, so, what are some of the similarities, I guess, between playing like drum set in a pit orchestra for a musical versus playing like timpani or being a part of the percussion battery in this sort of orchestral land?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely I wouldn't the thing that I got in my classical training was reading, being
Mm,
able to read music notation, be able to read notes, read rhythms, read sight read, all these things completely translate into the theater world,
hmm
um, and and so that's all tied together. As far as preparation, um, whether I'm playing you know timpani or I'm playing a musical, I've got to know the music inside and out. It is part of our job as percussionists, orchestral world, to know the rep, um, to know what's happening throughout the orchestra, to know dynamics, to know characteristic sounds, to know um, tempi throughout. Just those kind of things become innate, and you know a piece of music backward and forward and everything that's going on. I do that preparation for drum set in a theater world. Is I know each tune, I know each tempo, I know the style, and those that preparation is very closely related, just different means. Whether it's classical ones, theater, or playing a cover band gig or playing whatever. The preparation is the same. Knowing your part, knowing the music, knowing all the intricacies, and then you get together and you put it together in a musical way.
yeah. Um, so something that has always struck me, I guess, as one of these big differences between the classical and more pop styles, is that, well, first off, in the classical setting, everyone has their part in front of them, right? And you sort of mentioned that like reading That clearly that's a big deal for any classical musician. However, in a pop setting, like we don't always get the cleanest of charts, you could say. I'm sure you've been in some musical settings where it's kind of like these choices that this orchestrator is making are very questionable, and so it's the it kind of gets the responsibility kind of gets put on us in a way to make that piece come to life, right? So what you say about like knowing this, basically knowing the songs, right? That sort of rings true, I guess, in all styles. But so it seems to me that in these popular settings, the rhythm section, we get a lot more freedom to kind of experiment, I guess, but really just a lot more freedom to play the song, Whereas in a classical setting, it just seems that like you have to play your part and like you play your part play these notes at the right time. Um, so which of these two settings, I guess, do you find yourself like enjoying more often?
You know, after playing drum set for so many years and having that freedom to be creative and to add nuances and to do little things, I there's something about that is great. It's harder almost for me to go to the classical setting and have to play exactly what's on the page because there's no room to add. You have to play what's there. You have to play it precisely and accurately and exactly.
Right.
Um, you don't get that opportunity to add a flam or add a drag or add whatever that we get um, in the pop or theater. There's so many times I'll see a chart and it slashes. Just and it says groove or
Right.
whatever.
32 bar groove.
Exactly. Um, and yeah, I've had that even where it says just play 16. Like 16 measures of time and then this.
Yeah.
And that's completely great. And you would have that freedom to play what we want in this context of what's going on.
Right, in the context of what's going on, that I think that's an important part of like a lot of this stuff. One thing that I've noticed in my appreciation courses is that when we start to talk about certain pop settings or like jazz and stuff, there's this conception that it's all just made up, right? It's all just free. Like everyone's just kind of doing whatever they want and it just magically works. And it's like, that's probably about like 10, maybe 15% of it, like maybe, but there's a lot of other preparation that goes into something like that. Um, so for instance, when you have a musical, right, you have a score in front of you, right? So you have the form for all these tunes, excuse me, written out. Sometimes you have specific things to play, but for the most part, it's been my experience, at least with like drum set musical scores, that there is a lot of freedom involved. However, there's also this when we get into like when you get farther into like the pop world, like popular settings, like you mentioned a cover band at one point, it's like there is no chart, right? There is no music, um, and so you have to know the song, right? You have to listen to the recordings, and I think that's, to me, that seems to be one of the biggest differences, I guess, between this classical world and this popular world. Is like in the classical world, there have been so many times where like I've gotten a part and just like never even listened to the music. It's like, cool, I'll just play this part, great. Whereas like in a pop gig, it's like, oh man, I really need to listen to these songs to understand like the style and just the form of it. I don't know, what are your thoughts on kind of on that?
It's as someone who plays from music so often. There are so many jazz guys or cover band guys or whatever. They know every song by heart, and it's you call a song, you call it a key, and they nail it every single time. I've got to have music. you know, it's my brain just isn't there anymore. Like it's not what I
Yeah.
do. These guys, that's what they do all the time. So when I've played in a cover band, I made myself a chart. Yes, you listen to it and you prepare, and 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 you know the song, but you also have little guidelines because when you're playing 60 pop songs, like
Yeah.
you don't want to be the guy that doesn't stop when everyone else stops. Um, and so I found myself when I'm in that setting, I'm still using my classical training and writing notation, writing charts, writing things, so that I don't miss.
Right, right. Now that makes a lot of sense. I guess it's nice too because like you're kind of in the back in the drum set, right? So the stand kind of becomes part of like your whole setup. For I've actually like I've had gigs where like for me as a bass player, it's like they don't want that. It's like you can't have anything in front of you. It's like you just got to know the song, which is infinitely harder for me because I understand, man. Like reading has become so ingrained in my musical practice now that like it's almost like a comfort just to have that music in front of me, just to like know that it's there. And even if I get lost in it, it's still just like, okay, I can at least find something, something to latch onto. uh, yeah, that's kind of funny though. So you do a lot of stuff with the Houston Symphony, right? Playing drum set for like their pop concerts and whatnot.
Yes.
um, so is the preparation for that kind of gig, is that similar to like your musical stuff, or is that more along the lines of like the classical side of things, I guess? Or I don't really know.
That was one of my first questions to the principal percussionist. Like when I did my first show with them, I got all the charts, and my question was like, "Do I need to play this?" You know exactly. And he was like, "No, just play drum set."
Yeah,
Play
okay. Yeah, right.
and so there are charts. Everything's mapped out, um, and sometimes the charts are great and have great direction, and sometimes they're not. But it's a matter of, and often there are arrangements of songs, so you can't find the exact thing to listen to, and so get a style, get the style, get a reference to the original, and then play musically, and that's been my experience, you know, is playing just playing drum set musically in this ensemble, you know.
Right.
And we've done fun stuff, uh, we did an '80s show, getting to play uh, some Rush, with the Houston Symphony was kind of cool, like
Yeah.
it was still the tune. It was still, it had a nice rhythm section, but then you added the orchestra to it,
Right, right. You have the orchestration involved. That's actually that's pretty intense, man. Playing like a bunch of Rush songs. Though it's like there's not a lot of room for interpretation in that. In I feel like when it comes to that, because it's like Neil Peart, the drummer, is he was such a monumental figurehead in like the rock and roll world, and like his drum grooves are like the drum grooves, and so I imagine that sort of had to be a little bit more precise in a way.
Exactly. We did Spirit of the Radio, um, and has this epic, just big drum fill at the beginning. Unison, everybody's playing, um, and so because it's Neil Peart and everything was, they had to, they wrote it out, but they changed it a little bit, so everyone was still playing um, the feel and the basic idea of unison orchestra.
Right,
Uh,
right.
but then when it came to my part for playing the grooves, I listened to the recording and I played to my best how Neil would play it, from the right, but just all the little nuances that
Yeah.
so
Right
all
there.
that kind of stuff. I didn't just play boom, I was trying to do what Neil did, on the recording.
Yeah.
And so yes, it was a combination of playing what was on the page for this part, and then not playing the page and playing like nil for the other part.
Right, right. Now that's something that's pretty interesting. I think the the concept of like playing like somebody, So when it comes to these like you mentioned, Spirit of the Radio, right? So I imagine that when you're listening to that recording, you're listening for not just like the groove, right? But also it's like how is he hitting these things? How what is the sort of, because like you hit a cymbal in different spots, you're going to get different sounds, right? So it's like, where, how can I achieve those sounds? And there was something that you had said way back in the beginning of this, of like what sounds am I trying to get? And I think that it's different between the classical world and the pop world in terms of just like sound, right? Because like pop sounds for percussion and drum set, they seem to be a little bit more like gritty in a way, especially when it comes to drum set. You know, today everything is kind of like it's all extremely present. It's like it's there in your face. You know, it's almost like the attack is more important than the actual like note. You know, whereas in the classical realm, it seems to be a lot more reserved, I guess. Now, clearly that changes in like the modern eras. You know, when you get to like the 20th century, kind of all bets are off. But in sort of this common practice period, it seemed that like everything was much more like soft and a little bit more nuanced, and like the colors of these sounds mattered a lot more. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
And I would say the colors and the sounds have, I think they still matter the same. They've just evolved into their uses. You know,
Mm.
let's go back to the orchestral sounds. You know, when you're playing French opposed to German, lighter versus darker. There's these sounds and there's even technique that we have as percussionists. That's the German grip, that's the French grip, and it's these practices from those times, and it gives you different sounds by just how you turn your hand and hit the drum. And
Right, right.
there are crash cymbals that are called the Germanic or Viennese. Everything has evolved in each part, each country really in
Yeah.
this had its own sound, and so knowing those nuances and those characteristics are really important. Now, as far as those sounds, now it's you know they still matter, but don't have they're not regionalized. Now it's effect and and part of a piece in a different way.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So it's almost like the the colors of these sounds they still matter. You know, they matter in a different way, right? And it seems that like I guess it seems that today the sounds of it's almost more important that you be able to achieve like specific sounds out of these instruments as opposed to like tones or notes. You know, it's the being able to achieve like this particular sound. Uh, for instance, I guess like with like as a composer, right? I studied a lot of like orchestration and just different things that instruments can do. And something I think is really interesting with drum set, for instance, or just percussion in general, is that we can I, as a composer, can ask you guys to do a lot, basically. For instance, like, but I don't, I can't get too specific about it, right? It's like I need to tell you like what colors I'm trying to achieve, how dark of a sound I want, or how like is it like a big crash, or is it like a small kind of hit or something, and like sounds that I guess I hear up here. I've come to find out that it works best if I leave it up to the percussionist to kind of figure that out. Because you guys have a lot of leeway in how to do certain things. I mean, just from like this the what I guess you call it the implement, right? The stick choice, like
Right.
what you hit the instrument with. So for instance, like with a timpani, you generally have like mallets, right? And it kind of gives like a softer, rounder sound. But with drum set, you get like an actual stick with like a point, and you whack something, right? And it has more of a pointed sound in a way. So I guess can you give like a brief rundown in some of these implements that you've used before?
I mean, for example, if you, as a composer, write crash cymbal, and you notate it with an X and forte, I mean, that's that can be interpreted so many ways. Whether
Yeah,
it's concert crash cymbals or it's a single cymbal that you hit with a, or maybe maybe it's a small cymbal. There's so many things that can happen with crash, or cymbal, right?
right,
So,
right.
um, and so we as percussionists see all kinds of stuff. One that's like, what was this person thinking? Or two,
Yeah.
it's like, play a crash cymbal but make it sound like the color purple.
Like what?
Uh, then we have to.
Really do some research there.
Okay, who? Yeah. So we see. Well, there's no standard notation. Like
Yeah.
so. we appreciate when people take the time to specify, especially specific colors, and then it's our job as percussionists, yes, to interpret those and to be musical and to use our creativity, because and no matter what we do, the next person, they're not going to have the same symbol, even if it's the same exact symbol. It's going to sound different.
Right, right,
Now, everything, and that's and percussion is an art of sound, and everything is manipulable, and it can be a variable. So
right.
back to some of the implements, yes, timpani has mallets. They have, you know, I as a timpanist in college, for example, I always had at least 6 sets of mallets, from mallets that were a wooden ball, very articulate and clear, to thinner, lighter, harder felt, to big, soft, round, poofy sound, and everything in between. That's just for timpani. For drum set, I have a stick bag of 20 sets of sticks that are all different. They're different lengths, they're different weights, different woods, different beads, and they all sound different. They all look like drumsticks, but to me,
Yeah,
I get the cymbal, and I get different sounds. That's brighter, that's darker, that's more articulate. That's so that's just sticks for drum set. There's brushes. There's a million different mallets for marimba and xylophone and bells, and it's never ending. There are chopsticks. Um, everything is an implement. And everything is possible to achieve a certain sound. In class, with my students, we'll be playing something. I'm gonna let's try these mallets, and they sound like mallets to young kids, but we're getting different tones. We're getting colors. It's all about, and there is no right answer. It's what fits the piece, what fits the hall, what fits the room, what fits the student, what fits the musician. There is no one size fits all. And so the possibilities are completely endless, as far as the sounds and colors and everything we get as percussionists.
No, that makes a lot of sense though. And I think it's really interesting that you know when it comes to percussion land, like you don't start talking. You're not talking so much about pitch. I mean, it exists, yeah, but it's more about like timbre and color and just like what sounds can you achieve. Um, I don't know. I've always thought that's really interesting about the percussionist world. And also, so for instance, in your scene right now, you have a kit behind you, but it's one thing that I always I'm really trying to stress to my class right now is that percussionists, right? They don't just play one instrument, right? It's like a drum set, for instance. You have X number of pieces, right? And all of it makes the drum set, but it's at least 4 to 5 different instruments, and that's just the drums, right? That doesn't even include the cymbals or anything. So, there's like a lot of stuff that kind of happens in what percussionists are doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, could you just kind of give us a quick rundown of like the basics of a drum set?
Sure. As far as drum set goes, there are, there's your bass drum, your kick drum that you play with your foot. That's your low sound. You have the snare drum, which is in every pop song ever. That's always the 2 and 4, the backbeat.
Right. Doom, cat, cat, cat.
Exactly. That's the snare drum. So those are the 2 main components. Toms are an instrument in itself. There can be 1, there can be 2, there can be 10. You know, just
Yeah.
Bozio. Um, and then that's just, and talking about pitch, that's the purpose of so many toms, is to get different pitches. Even though we don't think as a tom as a pitched instrument, it's definitely got a pitch.
Right.
It's tuned. It's definitely there's precision and care that goes into how that sounds, and so that's a voice in its own. And then we have the cymbals. We have the hi hat, we have the ride. We could have another ride with sizzle, and then we have an infinite amount of crashes: small, large, thin, thick. Um, you know, the more mass, the thick cymbal is actually a higher pitch than a thinner cymbal with less mass is going to be warmer. And so, like, I've got probably 20 crash cymbals of my own, and depending, I was like, okay, I want this sound this time. I want this sound for the show. Or
Yeah.
it's it's a rabbit hole that never.
Yeah. I
Well,
know. So, oh yeah.
no, and as far as timbres and pitch and stuff, our pitch, for timpani or for mallet instruments is set. We can't alter that. The
Mhm.
only thing we can alter is the timbre of that instrument. If we play a marimba with a rubber mallet or play it with a yarn mallet, it's going to sound different, even though it's the same note. You know, but the instruments that aren't that we don't think of as pitched, they have a pitch. Wood blocks have a pitch. And it's just a wood sound. The concert toms, the snare drum, they all have pitches that can change depending on how we tighten or change the head. It changes the sound of the drum. So
Yeah.
pitch is, it's defined for mallets and timpani. Others, it manipulates the sound of the instrument.
Right. Right. I actually was talking about this with Luke Hubley the other day about these we very wrongly call like drums like non-pitched instruments because in reality they do have a pitch. It's
Right.
just the function of that pitch isn't the same as like a violin or a bass or a trumpet or something. It's like it more to me it's always more existed to sort of keep this like undertone kind of thing going. It's like it exists at like the lowest possible frequency, and it's almost like not even perceivable, but like it makes everything so much nicer when you can have like a set of pitch toms. It's just like it's like that much nicer.
Right. Right. Yes.
Yeah, anyway, I think that's really interesting. So let's see what else was on the questionnaire here. um well, yeah, I don't know, that's pretty much like all I really kind of had. uh I
And
guess, yeah.
I, tying this into the orchestral world, it's being a percussion or being a drummer of any style. The core of it is you're a musician, and
Mhm.
that's really the basis of it all. From the orchestral setting, being a musician that is you know a competent player, competent reader, um, knowing the style, all of that correlates no matter what you're doing. If you there from extremes from orchestral to heavy metal, those those guys have their own intricacies. Their own. I don't play that style, you know.
Mhm.
But there's so much musicianship that listen to a Tool album, and to make a 7-minute song just continue to expand and grow and build.
Yeah.
That's musicianship. And that's really the really important part behind it all is
Yeah. Man, speaking of that, I guess I've been revisiting a lot of old King Crimson albums, and like it blows my mind that with sort of musically what they had to work with at that time, and the things that they sort of made out of that. It's just like it's mind blowing, and like kind of like what you said about like just what it takes to even like conceive this like 7-minute tune.
yeah,
Like
right.
it's fascinating, man. It's one more thing actually. This kind of came up, I guess, as you were talking. So you teach a lot of high school or percussion, right? Or like I guess percussion tech. Is that the correct term?
Um, I teach all percussionists from you know really, if my span goes from fifth grade to collegiate level. Um, at my current school, I teach all the percussionists all the time. Fifth grade, I have 4 classes: fifth grade, sixth grade, middle school, and high school. Um, that's my job, is to teach these percussionists every single day. In their band class, I pull them out and I work with them, um,
Mhm.
and just continue on from year to year.
So, um, I guess the techniques that you're teaching these students, right? This is essentially like what you were learning first off, right? Like as a sort of trained percussionist, right? Like how all the mallet stuff works, and how to read, how to just conceive of a piece of music, right? I guess at what point ooh, that's not a bad way of asking that question. Um, when I guess when would you if at all introduce these students to drum set?
So I've not my fifth graders who are just getting started, but from sixth grade on, we always do a little bit of drum set each year.
Mm.
I actually had an all-state jazz drummer this past year. Yeah,
Nice, congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, just great students that work hard. And like he, so we do drum set. We're not doing it every day, all day, but I will do it in their private lessons. I at least introduce it and get all the kids behind the set playing, trying to figure out the coordination. Um,
Right.
I didn't have that opportunity. I had a drum set, and in my bedroom as a middle school and high school kid, I started playing, um, at church on Wednesday nights in high school, but I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't
Sure, sure.
have guidance. So I try to get these kids seeing notation, seeing what it looks like, seeing um, what it feels like. Funny story. You know, I went to Sam, but I had actually had an audition and scholarship to North Texas, and I changed my mind. But
Oh,
my very first part of that audition was the drum set room at North Texas, and I didn't. As a senior in high school, I didn't know how to read drum set charts. I didn't know how to play drum set. And the great Ed Soph, set this chart in front of me and asked me to read it. And so I read it in the classical style of boom, trying to figure out what the heck's going on. He cuts me off after like 2 minutes, and he's like, "This time with the metronome," and turns it louder. It was already on, and and so I'm playing again, and he cuts me off. He's like, "I've heard enough. Thank you."
yeah.
And it was brutal introduction to drum set.
Man, talk about being thrown to the wolves. Like your first experience with drum set is auditioning for Ed So.
Uh, they made everyone that came through do that part of the audition. I was well prepared for my other parts.
Sure, sure.
Those rooms weren't first. That was first.
Yeah,
And
right.
it's one of those memories I will never forget.
Uh,
But when I got to Sam, I had the opportunity to get in the lab band, um, and start learning drum set and learning charts, and played in the musicals and all these things and experiences that I had that led me to what I'm doing now.
yeah,
And
right.
and I'm so thankful that I changed my mind and decided to go to Sam, because I had so many experiences that I would not have gotten somewhere else.
Sure, right. I
So in the
understand that.
playing world and professional world and everything, it's closely, knit, and something I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Uh, well, I, any closing thoughts? Any sort of, I guess that kind of was a parting thought in a way, but I don't know. Any last words you want to say? If not,
Um, no, I think as your students are listening to this orchestral music, um, and other music that you're talking about, I hope they can listen to it in a new way as far as percussion goes, and start listening for these things. So how does this, percussion sounds I hear in this piece differ from this, and just and try to piece some of these things together, and listen to all styles of music.
yeah. Oh, are you still there, Joe? Oh, it froze on my end. Oh no. Okay. Well, I guess I don't know if we lost Joe or not. But that really is kind of all the time I guess we have today. So class, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to stop the recording here.